Hi gang, Rob here. It is the evening of 31 July 2016 and I have a From the Sharpening Bench video for you all this evening. If you've been watching lately, especially if you watched my knife sale video from last Thursday, the finish on this knife might look a bit familiar. We sold a Grayman Dua knife from the collection of Bob from Bonnie Lake in the same anodization pattern. It appears to be sort of a coppery bronze with a green over top and then tumbled to reveal that coppery bronze on the corners, which is really cool. And if you remember, that Dua was pimped by Kevin Smock of Kevin's Smock Knives. And you guys who follow the forums and the custom stuff more than I do, you may be able to explain, and please do in the comments if you know. If you go to Kevin's website, it says Kevin Smock Knives, formerly Bauer Blade Works, and I have no idea why. I suppose I could have Googled that, but so Kevin is a custom maker that Bob from Bonnie Lake is well acquainted with, and this is one of Kevin's, I guess you would call it a semi-custom. It is a model that he makes, and he makes a number of, and you can have them finished and with different milling patterns any way you like. It's called the SK23, and it is a purpose-built EDC blade by Kevin. They start at about $700 and go up from there, and it's sort of a blank canvas for his customizing work. Steels available, I believe, are S30V, a Damascus, and then this CPM 3V. And the blade style is, I would call it a modified Wharncliffe. Just really nicely done. A bidirectional satin, which is, I'm kind of a sucker for a bidirectional satin. So we have satin going the length of the blade on the flats, and then in this flat ground primary bevel, it's vertical to the edge or perpendicular to the edge. I love that. This one is wearing my 17 degrees per side secondary bevel with a little tiny 20-degree micro. Should we see if it'll cut? This is important because I'm going to give the knife some criticism, and you guys might want to keep what you see here in mind as I criticize, because sometimes I'm all wet. You got to actually have the cutting edge on the paper. That looks like it's pretty slippery through there to me. I don't know what you guys are seeing. I know it push cuts. Yeah. You keep your clammy fingerprints off the edge of the paper, it push cuts nicely. So, now that you've seen that cutting demo, remember that, because I'm gonna knock this blade a little bit later. Okay, so we've got this modified Wharncliffe blade out of 3V with a really nice forward finger choil, which also serves as a brilliantly designed sharpening choil, which you really got to have on a straight-edged Wharncliffe. If you've got any issues in this area, you'll never get that edge straight and flat. I don't care who you are, or even if you're using a Gatco sharpener, you're not going to make that edge perfectly straight and perfectly sharp hilt to tip unless you can get to the edge at the base. Okay, so just really, really, really well done, Kevin. Okay. That blade is affixed to a handle made of 6AL4V titanium. Now, the blade and both handle scales are just over 5/32 thick. I measure this blade at about 0.159, 159 thousandths. And the handle scales I measure about 161 each. Okay. We also have a titanium backspacer, and you can see how the green has been cleaned off, except in the valleys of the jimping and in the beautiful little cut in the front of that backspacer. Just really nicely done. Construction, you've got some locating areas, but they're kind of close together. The pivot is a locating area. The internal stop pin, which it's shouldered, but the setting ends of that shouldered stop pin are visible via through holes in each scale. Frankly, for a $700 and up custom, I would expect those holes to be blind. I wouldn't expect to see the stop pin ends. Just saying. And then we have no locating feature in the backspacer. The screws that hold the back of the knife together just go through holes in the backspacer, and you see nicely finished ends of those screws threaded into the other handle scale. Would we like to see positive pin locating back here? Yes, we would. Then you're also going to see the end of another screw, which is here. What does it do? It holds in place the leaf of the compression lock mechanism, licensed from Spyderco. And oh, this is so cool, guys. Before I get to that though, blade length 3 1/16, handle length 4 3/16, just so you know. So a little larger than a small Sebenza, but at 4.7 ounces, about twice the weight. Okay, that's my knock on the knife. In that 3-inch EDC class, it's not going to be a heavy use knife. A Wharncliffe blade is really never a heavy use blade style, in my mind. I think this knife could lose a 32nd from all three pieces. Go with an 1/8 inch blade and an 1/8 inch thick stock on both sides, and we trim down that 520 thousandths handle. Let's see, by 3/32, so you'd be about 430 thousandths ish, and I bet your weight would come down into the 3.5 range, which I think would be much more appropriate for a knife this size. Now I get it, you're charging $700 for a knife, you want it to feel substantial in your user's hands, but I think it could lose a little weight and be a better knife, just my opinion. Having said that, it does cut really well, even at its thickness. So. Okay, now back to the compression lock. This I think is so cool because it is licensed from Spyderco. It is called a compression lock. It is disclosed that it's licensed. But Kevin did something that I have been drawing on napkins and pieces of scrap paper for years. Instead of taking a huge chunk out of one side of the frame, which then affects your grip, especially in a hammer grip for hard use cutting, let's leave the spine of that handle intact and affix a button that comes through one scale with which to release the lock. Golf course clap, Kevin. I love it. And because it is recessed into this milled slot, which matches the tube behind it cleverly, it's not flush, but it's nearly flush, and it's to a point that I don't think you're going to depress that button unintentionally. Oh, did you see that? Pretty slick little front flipper design too, don't you think? I don't think it messes up the lines of the knife at all, but it's sort of discreet. It's not jimped in the front where you make contact with it, and it can't be, if you notice, because, oh, I guess it could be. I was thinking there's a stop pin involved, but they're not. The stop pin is internal. So it could be jimped, it's just not, and really doesn't need to be. I've never misfired with it yet, and guess what? Because of its lock, it doesn't matter where you grip the knife or how hard, it flips the same all the time. And it flips very well. It's very definitely a light switch flipper. It can't be a push button flipper because if you push button it, you're pushing the blade into the handle. That's okay. Just a very natural motion. Centering is quite good. You notice the spine is crowned very nicely. A little jimping on the blade spine, which is actually more usable if you're back on the handle a little bit than it is if you're in the choil. We could have made a few more cuts, I think. Not that you need jimping if you're in this grip, I don't think. Maybe it's more comfortable for your thumb without it. You're not in a motion here that you're wanting to go forward on the blade anyway. So if you're in more of a tactical grip, let's look at our grip, shall we? I guess if this isn't a real natural grip with my finger here. The butt seems a little short, and it really fills the hand better to come up here with it and let the thumb, in a kind of a bushcraft grip that I like, let the thumb come over the front of the frame a little bit. That feels really powerful, and it's just a good grip. The draw cut grip, the same. I kind of almost want to be here, and it really fills the hand very well. In a saber grip, you get two options. Come back here, or you can come up here. How about that vertical draw cut? A little uncomfortable in this area, but that's really, that's where the slack is going to be in the knife as you're cutting. So not bad. This is the area that I usually like to pay attention to, and it's really nice back there. And not that you're ever going to use this grip, but if you did, pretty comfy. And if you look at the SK23 on Kevin's website, you'll see that it is almost infinitely variable. Damascus available for clips and maybe some inlays, and milling patterns kind of are only limited by your imagination and Kevin's technology. The knife, if I didn't mention it, is on a caged ball bearing system. You know what? We do have one other positive locator right here. That's the stop for vertical movement in the locking leaf. That's a little different than Spyderco. That pin for instance, in a paramilitary 2 would be forward, which I think might give it a little more rigidity in this direction where the forces are applied, but not a big deal. I'll give that up so I can have this button, frankly. Corners on the knife are a little square for my taste, especially if you're going to make it this fat. I would prefer to see some nice 45-degree chamfers there. What we have is just a barely broken edge. If you guys have the Applied Weapons Technology Griptilian scales, the corners of this knife feel very similar to that. Here's kind of a sad thing, for me anyway. Not that it would be hard to remedy, and I'm sure if you ordered one of these from Kevin, he could do it. The knife is very ambidextrous, more so than a paramilitary 2. It's almost easier for me to operate that button with my left index finger than with my right thumb. But he gives us no left-handed clip mount option. Would 2 more holes in that handle really bother me? They wouldn't. But if you're right-handed, you might not appreciate having lefty holes in your custom knife. I get that. But if I ordered one of these, I would definitely order it to fit my left hand. I wouldn't really care about the lock, though. I'm so used to operating a pair of 2 this way that this feels pretty natural to do it with my index finger. Does it affect my grip? It might. I don't know, but I think I'd leave it where it is. Just me. Action on the knife, you guys can see it's smooth, it's free. You can do all your normal compression lock wizardry with it, I think. Yeah, any way you want it. Can't really Spidey drop it. I guess you could, but I really dig this front flipper because it's out of the way in your pocket. It's not poking out into the, if this is in your right pocket, your hand's going to come in here. One thing about flipper knives I hate is that flipper's always catching your hand on the way into the pocket. Not this one, just a really smooth slip down the handle there. Nicely done. Not overly branded in its identification. Just the Smock Knives logo on one side and the bold declaration of the super tough, super edge-taking 3V steel. A steel I've come to love. Because it is super tough. You can thrash it, man. But, when you need to cut, you know that your edge is going to be beauteous. You've seen some of my Bark River sharpening projects in 3V, and you've heard me say how shocked I am at the keenness of an edge that it takes and the polish that it takes, and it holds that edge. Man, does it hold that edge. Now here's one thing I got to mention, because this is a matter of personal taste, but I am not a huge fan of lots of anodizing and stonewashing, and I think this is as tastefully done as it can be, and it's a super great utility finish. You guys remember, if you watched that sale video with the Dua, it had some pretty good pocket trails in the handle that you could see if I pointed them out, but you would never notice unless you were looking for them. So this tumbled finish with this green over brass or bronze or copper, I think is going to be a really durable as well as very attractive finish. One thing this knife doesn't have, and frankly I hate, is an acid stonewash blade. I don't think there's a worse finish, with the possible exception of a bead blasted blade, that you can do to a knife than acid stonewash. Because yes, I love stonewash blades, I love satin blades, but I detest acid stonewash blades, because if you use them a little bit and if you sharpen them once, the powdery residue that gives it that acid wash look gets rubbed off the knife in a blotchy fashion, and the blade just ends up looking like crap. I don't really get that finish. I think it became popular before guys started using it a lot, and it sort of was in that, it was part and parcel of that sort of industrial pimped out folder look that became popular 2 or 3 years ago, that I think is fading now in favor of more refined looks on really expensive knives. I don't know that guys really want, as they look at it over the long term, knives they paid $500 to $1,000 for that look like they were dunked in acid and tumbled with rocks in their washing machine. This is a really nice package. What a smart looking blade, isn't it? I love the satins, and then you come down to that secondary bevel and you go, oh man, it means business. And it does. One other critique I'll give this knife that I feel generally positive about is the pivot. Very ZT801. You have 2 pivot screws that meet in a round center pivot. So both screws are male. The center, the pivot barrel, is female, and it's round and unrestrained. So you turn one side, both sides spin. Why do I think that's a problem? Well, this knife's a good illustration. I flipped it a little bit after I got done sharpening it, and I noticed it had a little side play in it that I hadn't noticed before. I put a T10 Torx wrench in this side. Guess what? The other side spun a little bit, and then this side threaded out rather easily. It wasn't really tight. Had Loctite in it, red Loctite, and it wasn't tight. I only needed one Torx wrench to get it out. So that tells me pivot is turning in handle with these broad heads lying against the titanium frame. They're staying put, and the red Loctite was broken loose by flipping the knife. Okay, guys, makers, manufacturers, make the female side of your pivots restrained in the handle, please. Unless you're using a super huge pivot that gets a lot of friction, like a Hindra or Strider pivot, please restrain the female pivots in the handle. Especially if you're going to make knives that are really designed to be flipped more than they're cut with. Okay? Just avoids a lot of problems down the road. I never have a D-shaped Benchmade pivot come loose, and axis lock knives get flipped open and closed as much as any knife. Fine threads and restrained female pivots are the key to success. These are nice fine threads, by the way. Just really nice work. Oh, I gotta give it props where props are due. We have a flat stock spring titanium clip. And guess what? It goes in the pocket with one hand. I would maybe prefer a little more lift for thicker pants. It comes out of the pocket without tearing it up, and it holds the knife adequately. Even though it's a $700 and up custom, I'll take it. It's just a nice clip. Let's see, slip it in here. Yeah, I would like a little more lift. I got a pair of khaki shorts, cargo shorts on with a double thick pocket seam, and it hitched a little bit. But really generally well done. Nice knife. I've had this knife for, gosh, a month, and Bob only had it for like 3 days to play with before he sent it to me. Thanks, Bob. By the way, it'll cut now. That's all for this from the Sharpening Bench video, my friends. Grace to you and peace from God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ, and remember the word. And Bob's SK23 are sharp.